so-called in the so-called Athens education system is in Athens the education was not state sponsored. As a result, it has to depend on the paying capacity of parents. Hence, Athens was degraded. I said he was very a patriot, Hargarakara Tiranga, right? So he was a very great patriot, but he couldn't digest that Athens has lost the war with Sparta. I said Sparta and Athens are two Greek cities. They used to quarrel among themselves, like India and Pakistan, and Athens lost in Sparta. As a result, he couldn't digest, and he was telling why Athens has lost the war. That makes us to come into this discussion called justice, ideal state, and everything. So he compares education system in Athens and Sparta, and he says that in Sparta there is state-sponsored education, whereas in Athens it is not present. Hence what he says is education, so he has favored one education system, that is state-sponsored education, that is universalization of education. Why? It is not just those people whose parents are having the capacity to listen or to send their children, but universalization of education. Not just the wealthy people should be affordable, but all the people should have opportunity. Should have opportunity. All the people should have opportunity. This is first thing that he said. And he said that in order for all the people, universalization of education means all the people will be getting the opportunity. In order to get this opportunity, it should not be in the hands of private players. Rather, it should be in the hands of the government or the state. Hence, what they say is, or what he has said is, it is the responsibility of the state to provide education. State's responsibility is to provide education. Or the important function of the state is pedagogic function. This is getting their children or getting their people educated. That is the important theory of state. Now, second difference that he has observed is in Athens there is no education for women. Women were kept outside the education system. Women were kept outside the education system. They were not given the opportunity for education. So Plato felt that the state is leaving half of the population uneducated. As a result, Athens is lagging in their military strength, in their physical education. As a result, Athens is lagging educated people in the state because half of the people are illiterates. So he has propounded the second thing, saying that education should be universal, which means it should include women's education also. You give education to women. Now remember, Plato was called as the romanticist, right? I discussed this somewhere way back in my first class or second class. In his Republic, he gives radical ideas. As a result, Karl Popper said him as the known as a totalitarian, right? Plato is the first totalitarian. Some people say Plato is the first feminist scholar. Why they say Plato is the first feminist scholar? Because Plato has propounded women to become philosophers. He didn't restrict philosopher king only to man, but women can also be eligible to become the rulers. The second thing that he has said is women should get education. At that point of time, women was not confined to the four walls. They were not having education. As a result, he is called as the first feminist, right? So he has said this is the second greatness of Plato's education. The third concept that he has propounded is your education is getting just information, but your people are not having physical strength or mental strength. Physical strength or mental strength. In India also you call this చదువుకున్నోడు కంటే సాకులోడు మేలు అని, right? Physical strength or mental strength. You do not have that in Athens. So what he said is education is not just imparting information and going to Narayana and Chaitanya, but building the personality test or the personality of people. This is called education. So he has propounded one system of education where it will build up the critical faculties of human mind. He wants to build the critical capabilities. So he has said that critical faculties of human mind has to be developed. Along with that, they have to be developed physically. For them, give military training also, which means everyone has to get military training to become physically fit. And this compulsory military training in English is known as conscription. Conscription. What is conscription? ఖచ్చితంగా వెళ్ళి అగ్నివీర్ సవ్వండి అని చెప్పడం, రైట్? Conscription, that is compulsory military training. Now, why education should be sponsored by the state? According to Plato, it has to be sponsored by the state because who cannot afford education will miss education, and then state will be missing one vital source called human resource. Look at the beauty that he has said way back in 300 BC. If state is not sponsoring education, it is going to lose human resource. It is going to lose the demographic dividend that India is facing now. It is going to lose the demographic dividend. Someone asked, how far is it relevant for present day's democracy? We'll say this, how far it is relevant in the present days. But look at this, right? So this is one thing. Demographic dividend is to be reaped. They have to get benefit of its human resource. If you want to get the benefit, if the state wants to get the benefit, then state should sponsor the so-called education, universalization of education. Hence they have to give Jagannath Ammavadi. That is what he is saying indirectly. Okay, next, why he said that women should get education? Why he said that women should get education? Because state is depriving itself from half of the human resource. In the entire population, half of your strength are women. Next, if you are not giving them education, you are depriving them the advantage of getting half of the human resource. That is first thing. That is the reason his state, he has supported this. Now, he also said that not only state should sponsor education, but state should control which type of education is being imparted. Which type of education should be imparted. Which means he is against giving autonomous status. He is against giving autonomous status to educational institutions. Why? If you give autonomous status like Vellore Institute of Technology or Satyabhama Institute of Technology, you will not be knowing which type of education they are teaching. As a result, what they say is, in the autonomous, rather than giving autonomous status, keep a watch. The state should watch what is being taught. And he says that education is very important because it is has one of the greatest advantage called political socialization. A very great term, political socialization. It has a great relevance. It has political socialization. What is political socialization? Socializing the citizens means they become desirable citizens. Right? సంఘంలో ఎలా నివసించాలో తెలిసేది ఎక్కడి నుంచి? విద్య నుంచి. So socialization means they become desirable citizens. And people, how they become desirable citizens? Because they will come to aware, they will aware with the so-called, they will get aware of the political system which is functioning. As a result, they becomes political socialized members. So Plato's scheme of education states that it has to be state sponsored, it has to be state controlled, women also has to be given education, and that education should be comprehensive, which covers everything that is called the primary stage, the elementary stage, the secondary stage, and the higher stage. And then he says that education should not be just confined to the so-called the four walls of information imparting, but to the so-called personality development. Now, this is what he says. Based on this education, he speaks about the so-called stationing of the people. Now, if you look at Plato's scheme of education will continue for 50 years. Right? After 10th class, you'll be leaving the schools. Right? That is called 15 years education. But Plato's education will continue for 50 years, 50 long years. Which means this 50 years should be minimum education if you want to become a ruler or a king. If you want to become the king, the minimum education that he should have is 50 years. Now, how he has given the first stage of education will be lasting for 0 to 6 years. 0 to 6 years. Children between 0 to 6 years. Everyone should get pre-primary education, where children will be learning moral stories. Children will be learning music. Children will be learning gymnastics. In his first stage, he has proposed these three things, and he says that they have to get these three things. Plato says that music is, why music? Music is the exercise of mind. EXERCISC. Gymnastics is exercise of body. Moral stories is building character. So when your mind and body are exercising, your character will be built up with moral stories. This is the first stage of education that he has proposed. The second stage of education will contains primary stage of education and secondary stage of education. Primary plus secondary. Now this is up to 18 years of age. 18 సంవత్సరాలు వచ్చేంత వరకు చదువుకోవాలి. Now, what type of education that he has said? The subjects that should be taught here are history, civics, economics, etc. Now, after conducting this education, what the state should do is, it has to conduct a screening test. MSET exam, screening test. Why screening test? This is the first stage of filtration. You filter now. At the age of 18, everyone will be filtered. Now, how? By conducting a screening test or an entrance test. Now, those fellows who are failing in this screening test those who are failing in this screening test, they will be joining the producer class. They are not fit for warriors or anything. They are fit for producer class. Now those who pass in this exam, they will be given the next stage of education. They will be eligible for the next stage of education. So this makes the next stage of education to come into being. So in the test one, whoever is failing, they will fail here. So they will be, the next stage will be for this. Now in this test, those who are failing, they go and get stationed where? In the producer class. This is how he said you have to station people. If you pass, go for next stage of education. Now those who has passed here brings the third stage of education, that is from the so-called 18 years to 20 years, between the age group of 18 to 20 years. Now what they will do is they will go for higher education. Now in this education, this is compulsory military education. Compulsory military education. All the people who are passing here will get compulsory military education. So what does this mean? Through his test, he is testing whether you are having that aptitude for higher education or not. Right. After conducting this compulsory military education for 2 years, there will be second screening test. Second screening test or second stage of filtration. Again, they will filter. Now, those who pass in this filtration, or sorry, those who fail in this filtration process, now as they pass through the first stage and now they are failing the second stage, they will be confined. They will be confined to the so-called the second class. That is here producer is over. They will be confined to, which means they have courage. Now they are confining to the so-called warrior class. Warrior class. Now those who fail here, now those who pass here are now going for higher education again. They will go for higher education again. Now for these fellows, there will be no exam next. There is no exam next. Why? Now this is the persons who are having reason. As a result, no need to further connect. No. Now, for these persons, however, there is no exam, but they go for higher education. So this makes us to enter into the fourth stage of education. That is fourth stage of education from the years of 20 years to 35 years who are passing the second screening test. Now here they will be taught some subjects which build their reason, such as the logical reasoning, right? Dialectics. What is dialectics? Debates, how to debate, how to win the debates. They will be conducting philosophy, or they will be teaching philosophy and the other upgraded forms of subjects. After 35 years, they will go for next stage of education, and that is the fifth stage of education, where the fifth stage of education, where this will be from 35 to 50 years. Now, what is the education that they are getting here is they are getting the education on practical knowledge. Now they experience this practical knowledge, and after this, they become, after 50 years, they become eligible to become the philosopher king. They become the philosophers now, and this philosopher will be eligible to become the king, and that king is known as the philosopher king. This is how, through his education system, he has placed people into their respective classes, or he has stationed people into their respective classes, such as the producer's class, such as the warrior class, such as the philosopher's class. This is how he divided through his education system, where in the first stage of education, he is propounding pre-primary education. In the second stage of education, he is propounding the so-called primary education and secondary education, and in the third stage, a warrior's education, compulsory military education. Fourth stage is and fifth stages are for making philosopher kings. Now the question is, so in order to become from philosophers, every year there will be many philosophers who will be coming out, like many students coming out of IITs, right? Now in that many students, who will become the king? That is the question now. Who is becoming the king? So first thing is, in order to become the king or philosopher king, Plato says that a philosopher king should satisfy some eligibilities. First thing is, he should be a man of reason. Obviously, by this education system, you'll get reason. Now, in the education system, if the enough reason is not imbibed, rationality develop అవ్వకుండా ఊరికే ఎగ్జామ్కి బై హార్ట్ చేసుకుంటూ వెళ్ళిపోయామనుకోండి, even if you pass that, if enough reason is not groomed by education, then you will go for the next thing. So I am asking, or I am saying, say that there is 40 or 50 philosophers who has emerged. In that philosophers, who will become the king? So here, how to select a philosopher king is, in a very state, a state is said to be well governed. A state is said to be well governed where rulers are reluctant to rule. Rulers are reluctant to rule. But rulers should be eager to govern. Eager to govern. So rulers should not be reluctant to rule, but rulers should be eager to govern, and in that stage, rulers are reluctant to rule, which means a state where rulers will not be ruling but governing will be the best state. In that state, there will be no problem, because when you are ruling, you are showing authority. When you are governing, you are showing responsibility. That is the meaning. When you are ruling, you are showing authority. When you are ruling, governing, you are showing responsibility. Right. Now, out of these 40 members, who has to be the king or who has to be the philosopher? Will there be competition here now? The thing is, here there is no problem. Here there is no such problem. Why? Why there is no problem? Because philosophers love knowledge, philosophers possess knowledge, they love knowledge, they possess true knowledge, they understand one thing very clearly after this education, that money and power are the not source of happiness. Money and power are not the source of happiness. Hence, they will be reluctant to rule. They will be reluctant to rule for the sake of money or power, but they feel it is responsible and they feel very happy that whoever is going to take this thing, they will always welcome that person. Why? All will be of equal attitude now. There will not be any ego feelings among them because everyone is equally enlightened and they know that with ruling it is not a rule but it is a responsibility. So they are symbol of knowledge. When I say symbol of knowledge, the symbol of knowledge is the symbol of sacrifice. The symbol of sacrifice. As a result, as a symbol of sacrifice, they sacrifice it for the person. They do not compete here. As a symbol of sacrifice, they think that as a part of their duty towards the state, philosophers accept responsibility reluctantly. Or the responsibles will there will be no competition that I have to rule after Narendra Modi. No, because they know that it is a responsibility and they will be just enough. Now they will be happy without their rule because they will be self-contented because they have knowledge, they love knowledge, and that knowledge makes them great citizens without any power. In that situation, people will request the rulers to rule, not rulers will be going to the people and giving money to elect them. So they know that it is nothing. So, as per Plato, those states are well governed where rulers are reluctant to govern, rather, there where rulers are eager to govern, or the ruled is eager to govern. అంటే ప్రజలే మమ్మల్ని రూల్ చేయండి అనేసి అడుగుతారు కానీ ఫిలాసఫర్స్ వచ్చేసి మేము రూల్ చేస్తామనేసి చెప్పరు బికాస్ ఫిలాసఫర్స్ హ్యావ్ నౌ ఎవ్రీ నాలెడ్జ్ దే ఆర్ ద అల్టిమేట్ పీపుల్ హియర్ నౌ నౌ So through this, he says that you can establish a philosopher king and then you can establish the so-called immoral state. So in this, what he has observed is Athens is not in the right direction. Plato wanted to make Athens an ideal state because Plato believed that the real problem is the ruling class are ignorant. I already said that. Ruling classes are ignorant, hence they have to have this. As a result, he believed that philosophers has to be ruling, not the ignorance. Now the question is, here the people or the philosophers will be reluctant to rule. then do you think that with that reluctance, if they are నాకు ఇష్టం లేదు రూల్ చేయడానికి, I will be reluctant, but as people are coming, I am coming and sitting here, then the thing is, if they do justify, will they justify to their role? That is the question, right? ఇష్టం లేని వ్యక్తిని తీసుకొని వచ్చి నేను చేస్తున్నాను అనేసి అన్నప్పుడు, will they be happy, or will they be the so called happy with that role, or will they fulfill that role? If a person do not have interest in any subject, he will not perform his duty perfectly, generally. So they say that Plato's design is right, but his prescription is wrong. Many philosophers or many people, they say that though Socrates has said, or Plato has said a very good description of philosopher king, but ultimately the philosopher king is reluctant. Now how do you say that philosopher's king is going to rule ultimately, right? So what they say is, Plato has failed to say that he has emerged philosophers, but if the philosophers is not happy to rule, or if they are not reluctant to rule, then how can you ensure that they can give to the best? Why? Best ఇవ్వాలి అంటే మీకు దాంట్లో ఇంట్రెస్ట్ ఇవ్వాలి. Without interest, how can they rule? Hence, in order to tackle this problem, we have to think about other measures also. One fundamental problem of Plato is he completely ignored the element of human psychology. What is that human psychology? That is, he is telling that politics have answers in philosophy rather than psychology. Person will be bored by doing repeated work. So, in this knowledge, two things or two critiques of Plato are, one critic says that, or one criticism on Plato is, you are saying that philosophers are reluctant. How, when they are reluctant, they will be not having interest. Now, if you are making a fellow who doesn't have interest to rule, how he is going to rule to the best? This is the first question. The second question is, you are saying that 50 years of education, here people are not ready to study even for 22 years. How can you make 50 years of education? Because this gets the people to get bored. And why bored? Because this is a repetitive work. Again and again, again and again. You have to write 6 times UPSC. Repetitive work. As a result, human psychology says this is going to get bored and people won't like this. But Plato has said, or Plato has defined on, went with not psychology, but he went with philosophy. Why philosophy? He said that politics will have answers in morals or philosophy rather than psychology. So with this, second criticism of Plato is he has completely ignored the element of human psychology. Now, this is the drawbacks. So this is what he has said. However, these are the criticisms. Whenever you are saying, you have to write about the same thing about Plato's theory of education. This is Plato's theory of education and Plato's criticism on education. A very beautiful context. Finally, 50 years of education is something which might not work. Now, along with this Plato's theory of education, in order to make people or station people in their respective positions, Plato also said that you should have something called uh, whatever the education that you had, if you want to make people to be the so-called perfect in their way of ruling, then Plato said that along with this education, they should have some more thing or one more thing, and which is called the theory of communism. Theory of communism. This makes us to enter into the next theory of Plato, that is called theory of communism, that I will be discussing tomorrow. How, why theory of communism is there when theory of education is there? Theory of communism endukundi when you do have already the theory of education now. See what the context is simple. Even after having this much education, if there is still something like uh, 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 some self-interest in you, that self-interest is going to be removed, and you are going to make the person completely fit, and to remove that dirt which is still imparting on the individual even despite this education, you should have one theory, that is called theory of communism. Now why here Plato's criticisms are two. One criticism on education is how can the philosophers rule when they do not have interest? Second thing is how can the so-called people won't get bored over a period of time? So these answers you have in his theory of communism, and I am going to take that theory of communism tomorrow. This is for the day where we have covered justice as an architectonic principle. With that, justice will be over. But in order to install that type of justice, you should station people as per their elements. In order to station that, you should give them education, and then you should know how they are eligible. A very perfect blend of education, at least up to 22 years or 25 years. His Plato theory of education is perfectly well. Now, this is the thing that we have discussed. I'll continue tomorrow with Plato's theory of communism, and in that communism, we will see how Plato tries to answer the questions that he had on the so called education. This is for the day. We have less than 1 minute. If you have any questions, you can ask me, otherwise, we'll wind it up. Thanks for joining. Thank you, Emma.